Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call a meeting of Government Operations Committee for Monday, April 17th, 2023. Roll call, please.
Bancroft?
Here.
Lencioni? Petrilla?
Here.
Wirball?
Here.
Besner?
Here.
Weber?
Here.
Calamaris?
Here.
Payleitner? Here. Bongard?
Okay, thank you. Item number 3, video game statistics, March 2023, information only. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, seeing none. We have one item tonight for an omnibus vote. Can I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Dave, second by Brian. Roll call, please.
Bancroft?
Yes.
Petrilla?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Besner?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Calamaris?
Yes.
Payleitner?
Yes.
Bongard?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes. Item 5A, Police Department, recommendation to approve proposal for B1 liquor license application for Dave's Burritos located at 3677 East Main Street. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Mr. Sokaitis. So this item appeared early this evening at the Liquor Control Commission and advanced with a 4-0 recommendation. This business is in the strip mall on East Main Street between the Zen Leaf and Giordano's Restaurant. They've been in business since September of 2014. Dave is here from the restaurant to answer any questions you might have, but he's looking to offer beer and margarita sales in conjunction with on-site food sales. Bassett and Dram Shop insurance is in place, and either Dave or myself can answer any questions you might have.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
Move for approval.
Moved by Rita.
Second.
Second by Brian. Roll call, please.
Bancroft?
Yes.
Petrilla?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Besner?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Calamaris?
Yes.
Payleitner?
Yes.
Bongard?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes. 5B, recommendation to approve proposal for massage license application for Zeal Spa Corporation located at 2015 Dean Street.
Thank you, Mr. Sokaitis. So this too advanced with a 4-0 recommendation earlier this evening. The site in question is the former Shangri-La Spa, which is on Dean Street behind La Vita Cigars. There was a 5-year moratorium on this location for previous nefarious activity. That moratorium lapsed January of this year. We vetted the applicants. They do operate a similar business in Lombard and have done so for 2 years. The massage therapist also worked in a massage facility in Riverwoods, Illinois, once again with no contacts. Adam is the owner and operator. He is here to answer any questions that the committee might have, along with Dan, who's the therapist. For right now, just the two of them are going to occupy the space. They are looking to hire a third employee, which would be a state-certified massage therapist. The hours of operation are 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. Once again, they're the only 2 employees as of right now. They did sign a 1-year lease. They're looking to open up in June of this year. We did have a very stringent background with the applicants. They are well aware of our massage ordinance and some of the nefarious activity that we've shut down in recent years. With that, I can answer any questions you might have and or the applicants.
Question or comments? Yes, Brian.
Just for clarity, is this completely different ownership?
Completely different ownership.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
A new applicant altogether.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Ed.
And then, was that space unoccupied then for 5 years, or just a different business?
It was unoccupied. There was a ping pong facility. I believe that might have been partially occupying the space, but the spa itself, which I believe is 12 rooms, it's rather large, has been unoccupied for over 5 years.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, a motion and second, please.
Move for approval.
Second by Brian, second by Ed. Roll call, please.
Bancroft?
Yes.
Petrilla?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Besner?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Calamaris?
Yes.
Payleitner?
Yes.
Bongard?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes. 5C, recommendation to approve an ordinance amending Title V Business License and Regulations, Section 5.08, Alcoholic Beverages, Chapter 5.08.95, Late Night Permit, and Chapters 5.08 .140 license renewal deadlines of the St. Charles Municipal Code.
Thank you, Mr. Sokaitis. That's a mouthful.
Yes.
This too advanced forward with a 4-0 recommendation from Liquor Control earlier this evening. As part of our annual renewal process, we have a little over about 130 or so liquor licenses, along with massage licenses, video gaming licenses, and of course tobacco or alternative nicotine. The whole process is pretty daunting. We start that process in February. Letters go out to all the licenses, and in fact, in regards to the liquor licensing process, it seems to be the same outliers each and every year that aren't meeting our deadlines. And when I say deadlines, we set a date each year that when the packets go out for all the information to come back to staff. It goes to the mayor's office, and then I sit down with the mayor's staff, and we vet each of the applicants. Currently, our liquor tax code has provisions to pass along late fees, and those are collapsed and codified within the code. Our current liquor license code only allows for a $50 administrative late fee when paperwork and fees aren't returned in a timely manner. I'll tell you that over the last number of years, it's been the same outliers each and every year that haven't met our cutoff dates. We've had to do a lot of phone calls, emails, and in a lot of instances, me or my staff are going out and chasing this down. So under the same methodologies that I just talked about with our liquor tax code, I'd like to implement that with not only our liquor licenses, but also our late night permits. In fact, some of the late night permit renewals are some of our outliers that are late to come back with some of their paperwork. So we have a sliding scale similar to our tax code, and that is your first violation or the first time you miss a cutoff, there'll be a $100 administrative fee. It would advance to $250 on the second go-around, and should there be a third, it'd be $500. And once again, that would be passed along for a classification or a license issue and a late night permit. So if we have the same folks that are causing us concern, we would pass those fees on accordingly. With that, I can answer any questions. I worked on this with Mr. Peppers, and of course, Ms. Conte's here, who does a lot of the back-end work for me.
Any questions? Yes.
So I'm just curious, why do we chase businesses who consistently miss?
You know, we try to pride ourselves on being very business-friendly, and quite frankly, Mr. Bongard, if we don't chase them, and let's say there's a lapse in their licensure, we only do a liquor control meeting once per month. So if we miss that date, I did the late night permits in March. Of course, we had liquor today in April for this month. If we don't get them back in a timely manner, they actually go unlicensed into May. So we try to do our best to get everybody licensed.
I would think there'd be an incentive, but, you know.
I would agree.
Yes, right.
What you said there's about 130 liquor licenses out there. What percentage do you think are late?
I'd say less than 5%, but it's the same outliers each and every year. And quite frankly, we're seeing the same folks that aren't paying their liquor taxes in a timely manner as well. And it's pretty cumbersome for staff.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions? Yes, Ed.
Outside of the lateness of the applications, is the whole process itself, can it be streamlined any further so that it's not as cumbersome? Or, and I don't mean take the eye off the ball and push things through, but are you streamlined as much as you can?
We have done, and I know I did a shout out to Ms. Bringleson and Ms. Conte last month. We've streamlined it as best we can. And there's just a lot of checks and balances, a lot of paperwork that has to be examined, whether it's insurance, Bassett training. There's always management and staff changes. We need to make sure their LLCs are intact. All the other departments help me with looking at, make sure they don't have any outstanding building code issues, late fees to the city as far as finance and whatnot. So we've tried. I think it's as good as it's going to get. But this, I think, will hopefully help some of the folks that are late each year, maybe pay on time and help us out a little bit with our paperwork.
And then when a state license is issued, though, does it take care of any of those? Meaning background checks or?
No, the onus is completely on the local entity or the municipality. They're licensed first locally and then state after us.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, Dave.
More of a comment. I know, obviously, a member of the Liquor Control Commission. We also discussed, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I got the impression, and Bill Todd's also a member, that, after maybe a year, we should look at this again and see if these measures have a behavioral change effect, and if not, maybe take action, a different course of action next year. So,
be happy to bring that back to committee and council. Thank you.
Questions or comments?
Yeah.
Can I have a motion and a second, please?
Move for approval?
Second.
Moved by Brian, second by Dave. Roll call, please.
Bancroft?
Yes.
Petrola?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Besser?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Calamaris?
Yes.
Hayleitner?
Yes.
Bonegard?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes. 6A, Information System. Recommendation to approve a resolution authorizing agreement with Gracias to provide digital government software for not-to-exceed cost of $67,146. Good evening.
Hi. Good evening. I'm Penny Lanter. I'm with the Information Systems Department. Tonight's request for digital government software is to increase the city's online capabilities in the pursuit of providing exceptional online services. This initiative will span 3 years, but will be implemented in phases. Tonight's request is specifically related to phase 1. The strategic planning process identified 4 strategic directions. Specifically relevant to this request is community engagement. In fact, 4 strategic goals of community engagement are targeted with this initiative. Modernizing the digital presence to increase accessibility, information sharing, and services online. Using digital tools to increase feedback and engagement. Increase outreach using a communication platform. And increasing transparency and understanding of city operations. Launching a new website, increasing the number of digital forms, and increasing the number of newsletter subscribers, and our direct outcomes is identified in the strategic plan. Additionally, the Digital Government Initiative furthers the organizational resilience strategic direction. The new software will increase efficiencies by reducing fewer administration tasks, for instance, less vendors, less POs, less invoices to deal with. Content management across the city by various city staff members will be standardized, and software support will be simplified. It will also increase the community efficiency by beginning to automate different types of requests for services. Gartner is a research and consulting company that conducts and shares research related to technology. And they identified digital government as that being designated to optimize, transform, and create government services. And that's what this initiative is aiming to do. It's going, like I said, it's going to be broken down into 3 phases over the next 3 fiscal years. The first phase is the foundational phase, so that's replacing the current city's website and replacing and consolidating them under one platform. It's initiating digital forms and back-end workflows and improving communication capabilities. Phase 2 will focus on community engagement application. This particular one is very similar to the one that was used for the strategic planning process. If you remember, to gather community input, there was a website where you could put on maps and submit feedback. So we'll have our own capability to do that for a gathering of information. It will also help to digitize or enhance the efficiency of public meetings management, like this one. Right now, we pretty much use Excel, Word, and email for managing agendas and things like that. So this will give us a platform to actually manage that through an application. As well as virtual meetings will have an improved presentation and be a little more user-friendly. Then phase 3 will focus on digital public records management. So those are like things like FOIA requests. We'll submit requests, and then there's a back-end workflow to help the staff fulfill those requests. But again, tonight's request is specifically for phase 1. So it's the website, the forms, and the communication ability. Currently, requests for city services come in mostly manual. There's a whole lot of PDFs out on the website. People download them, print them, fill them out, and mail them in, or bring them in person. And then once the request is received, there's really very little automation behind that to help track and move those requests along. So in conjunction with the launch of the new website, the plan is to have at least 1 to 2 PDF forms per department converted to a digital format and with the back-end workflow for those. And then the rest of the forms will be migrated over time. Likewise, the city's current technology management is fairly complex. We have a hosted infrastructure. We've got multiple content management applications. We have multiple supporting applications, for instance, email marketing and delivering, survey tools to enable search across the various sites, content quality tools, and there's more. And then each one of those has a separate support vendor for those tools. So the process we used to select a digital government partner included issuing an RFP and then building a team with a representative from at least every department, at least one. Then once we received the RFP responses, the team attended multiple demonstrations from each of the respondents, and then we scored those evaluations. We also conducted multiple reference calls with other municipalities. The result was that Granicus is a single vendor capable of meeting the greatest number of requirements. They were the only responding vendor that was compliant with federal government security standards, so that was important. They had the highest overall rating by the evaluation team and the lowest overall proposed cost. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments? Bill.
I have a couple, so just bear with me for a second. Great presentation, appreciate it. First thing I'd ask is, what's the time frame for phase 1? When does that get completed?
So phase 1 is slated to begin May 1st, hopefully with approval, completing at the end of the fiscal year, and then phase 2 would be basically the next fiscal year, and then phase.
Great. And then you mentioned Gartner, and is Granicus, are they, Granicus, thank you. Are they in the Magic Quadrant somewhere? Okay, that's fair. And then the reason I'm asking is because, you know, you guys sat through 11 other presentations that were kind of useless at this point because they didn't meet the security standards. Why isn't that we didn't use Gartner to pull in more relevant providers of this service?
Well, Granicus is a relevant provider. I mean, they're the one of the biggest ones out.
Yeah, but we didn't have anything to compare it to, right? I mean, other than the security standards. They're the only ones that met the security standards, right?
Well, they were the only ones that met the federal government security standards. We did have other responders. We had responders as well, and we sat through, I think there was 6 presentations from various functionalities.
Okay. So I know at one point, Larry came up, was talking about a consulting firm coming in to take a look at us from a security perspective. So are we tying that work to this project as well? So my question is there going to be a security scan, and are we doing work to ensure that whatever we're migrating to, you know, also passes whatever security we're doing with the rest of the systems?
Well, first of all, it's a cloud hosting application. So they're on servers that the vendor is needing. One of the advantages of cloud applications. They're also FedRAMP certified, so once they're certified by the federal government, to be assured that they will also try our.
Good, so there's no customization being done for ours. Okay, and then is there data storage costs involved in this? So is there consumption costs with this model?
It's a implementation cost and then an annual. Actually, it actually is a little.
So do we expect to save some money in the long run by consolidating away from the existing providers that we have?
Absolutely.
Have we forecasted any of those costs out at all?
Not down to the,
Okay.
I mean, just looking at all those vendors, we have a support kitchen, which shows support for and platform, so if you take all those away.
Yeah, that's good. Great. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
actually, I have three questions now. What is this quadrant thing you were talking about? I'm just curious.
Magic.
Yeah, so Gartner is a third-party, well-respected firm that essentially grades the competency levels of the vendors you choose to go with, right? And so when you talk about a magic quadrant, you're either ending up in the, and I forget the actual names, but there's like the most trusted, most used, down to the, not great experience type of, right? So if you're in the top left of the quadrant, that's your more desirable vendors versus the bottom right, I think it is.
Cool, okay.
Well,
Had no clue.
It's the ability to execute on their vision. So
Yep.
if you're in that top quadrant, by Gartner's definition, then you're in that
The best.
quadrant.
And this
Yeah,
is it, they're in that
Not
quadrant?
necessarily best either.
Oh,
It's,
okay.
You have to take in the criteria that Gartner uses to score those. Most of them probably would be applicable to our situation, but not all of them are. And one of the quadrants, I think, is a niche, the niche player. So sometimes that is the best fit.
Okay, cool. No, I thank you for that. Two other questions. You mentioned you talked to some peer communities. Is that right? What, may I ask who did you talk to?
We talked to Evanston, Illinois on their Gov Delivery. So Gov Delivery is the communications portion of it. We talked to Kalamazoo, Michigan about the website and the public records trust. We talked to Lakewood, Colorado about the community engagement. Their product is called Engagement HQ. The website, the forms, and we had a technology discussion with them as well. And Oswego, Illinois, we talked to them about their meeting management application.
And thank you. And then lastly, when you brought together these teams internally from each department, so are you the project leader of that, or who's?
I was the project manager for it, yes.
And then moving forward, are you, just from my knowledge, is that like a working group? Is that still will that working group still work?
Well, because it's going to be implemented in phases, most of those same people will keep coming in and out as we build out certain phases, but I don't anticipate all of them being involved in every phase.
Right, just the departments that pertain to that particular phase at that time? Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Oh. Yeah, just, Penny, there was a budgeted amount of $84,507. What was that number? Was that like before it was phased out, or is the 67 on the executive summary? It says the budget amount was $84,000.
That's how much we worked on the budget before we finalized the number.
Okay, and that's for phase one is what you requested?
Right.
Okay. And will there, kind of like the same question I asked Larry before, will there be any surprises? I mean, will you be back to get more money because we have outdated this or that, or it's more than they could handle, or?
This is a brand new implementation. Granted, we're going to have to take some of the content. I'm anticipating that. A lot of old content on the so I'm hoping that we can get rid of most of it and then just manually
Just start from scratch?
bring over the relevant pieces.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Okay.
does Granicus, it makes sense, the need to eliminate disconnected platforms, applications. I'm going to 5 different sites to do these things. So, does this provider have their own software to do all this, or do they just make it easier for us to manage it, but they ultimately are still leaning on other third-party vendors too?
It's their software.
Okay.
Granted, they buy other companies
Sure.
to make it their software, but it is their software.
Okay.
Go.
Last one, I promise. How are we supporting it? So after it gets deployed, who supports the platform? Is that included in this cost?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any cost estimates for future phases?
We do. So future phases next year will be about $59,000 between implementation of the next phase and then next year's subscription. And after that, year 3 is about $52,700 subscription. Year 4 is like 5% more than that, and year it'll go up about 5%.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, Dave.
So you said phase 2, this fiscal year is phase 1. So is there any plans, and if not, maybe I pose this to my colleagues, could we request like updates and like how this is going, this sort of, maybe once a quarter or something?
Sure.
Because I'm kind of, to Bill's comment about the savings, which is great, because you saw the logos, there's going to be some savings there, maybe some discussion or a talking point or a bullet point that shows what, if you crunch some of the numbers and get some savings costs, that would be cool interesting to see, so. Because that's a year. I mean, May 1st to May 1st, so, I'd like to know what's going on, so.
Well, we are going to be in a bit of an overlap this year while we're kind of still using, we're implementing one, but still using the old one.
Right.
So there's going to be a little bit of overlap this year.
Right. Yeah, I mean, again, not trying to burden your staff or whatever, just was curious if you could do that. Plus also to Rita's point too, we'll maybe be able to see if there are these little unexpected costs that might pop up or something. I mean, yeah, hope not. I mean, we hope not, but so. No, I would appreciate that. That'd be great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Move for approval.
Second.
Moved by Brian, second by Dave. A roll call, please.
Bancroft?
Yes.
Petrola?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Besner?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Calamaris?
Yes.
Payleitner?
Yes.
Bongard?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes. Item 6B, recommendation to approve a resolution purchase of Microsoft Exchange software licensing from Dell Marketing LP in the amount of $45,320. Good evening.
Thank you, Chairperson Sakaitis. Yeah, tonight I have before you a recommendation to purchase Exchange 2019, the email server solution from Microsoft, and the goal is to stay supported with our email solution. This will allow us to stay supported with an on-premise solution until we're able to migrate to the cloud-based version, which is Office 365. Yeah.
Any questions or comments from the committee? Yes, Bill.
So Larry, what was the staff resource limitation that we couldn't get that done this year?
Well, the network manager was a lead resource for the project, as well as a project manager left the city. So we have an opening right now with a key resource for the project.
Okay. Then what's the term of the license agreement? Is it a 1-year agreement?
It's perpetual.
So is this a throwaway then after we upgrade to O365?
Essentially.
And then your hardware, is this on-premise today?
It is on-premise.
And so are we running that on server-grade hardware somewhere here in the...
Yes, yeah, we have an environment set up to be able to...
Is that hardware compatible with Exchange 19?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
Move for approval.
Second.
Moved by Brian, second by Dave. Roll call, please.
Bancroft?
Yes.
Petrola?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Besner?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Calamaris?
Yes.
Payleitner?
Abstain?
Bongard?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes. Thank you. We have Finance Department, 7A, recommendation to approve a service agreement with the St. Charles Business Alliance in the amount of $698,600 for fiscal year 2023-2024. Good evening.
Good evening. On February 6th, the government ops heard from the Business Alliance. This is when they gave their annual funding request presentation. At the conclusion of the presentation, the committee directed staff unanimously to support the recommended amount. As just a reminder, this would be a total of $698,600 in total. $262,000 would come from the SSA 1B, and then $436,600 would come from the hotel motel tax revenues. And that's it. I can take any questions.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
Move for approval. Second.
Moved by Todd, second by Ryan. Roll call, please.
Bancroft?
Yes.
Petrola?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Besner?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Calamaris?
Yes.
Payleitner?
Yes.
Bongard?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr.
That
Chairman,
motion
real
passes.
quick, could I just say, sorry, Derek, thank you for, answering the questions before they are asked. Always appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita.
Mm-hmm.
7A, recommendation to approve a service agreement with the St. Charles History Museum for fiscal year 2023-2024 in the amount of $50,000. Good evening.
Thank you, Chair. This is the annual service agreement with the St. Charles History Museum that was presented back in February. The president of the museum is here. If there's any questions, this is for $50,000, which is the same amount as last year.
Any questions or comments?
Move for approval. Second.
Moved by Dave, second by Brian. Roll call, please.
Bancroft?
Yes.
Petrola?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Besser?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Calamaris?
Yes.
Payleitner?
Yes.
Bonegard?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes. 7C, recommendation to approve an ordinance amending Title 13, Public Utilities, Chapter 13.16, Water of the St. Charles Municipal Code to allow for changes in the rate structure for the water utility.
Thank you, Chair. The next two items are on the agenda. I'm going to cover comprehensively in one summary overview, and there's questions along the way. Please feel free to ask. During the budget process, staff discussed the need to implement the next set of utility rate changes consistent with the 2019 rate study. The study recommended changes to the structure to adequately fund operations, capital improvements, and the repayment of debt and loan obligations by undertaking several of these capital projects. Public Works has been planning and actually constructing some of these improvements over the last few years. So I'm going to highlight each utility and kind of just say before I go through each one that based on the recommended increases tonight, the average typical utility bill will increase about 4.7% based on our sample bill of $12 per month to $274. First, I want to touch on the electric utility. Overall, the electric utility is in pretty good financial shape. Revenues and expenditures are roughly $69, as recently approved at the most recent budget process. Most of the capital projects are sort of a maintenance mode, and overall, it's in good condition. The 2019 study recommended a 2% rate adjustment for the upcoming year to address incremental costs of operations and capital improvements. Staff took a look at the big picture overall with the electric utility and felt comfortable that we could pass on that rate increase for the electric utility this year. This would be the fourth consecutive year that the city did an analysis internally and determined that the electric fund was in good position to fund operations and capital for the upcoming year without a electric utility rate increase. We felt that this was a good thing, especially since electric typically compromises about 44% of the utility bill. On the water fund side, the budget as adopted was roughly $17.5 million in revenues, $20.8 million in outlays. This takes the projected water reserve down to about $1.2 million, which is lower than we would prefer. We talked about that during the budget process. And this is also after adjustments that we made to the budget to defer about $2.6 million in capital outlays next year, just so we don't put the fund into a deficit position, because the fund simply didn't have the money to accomplish all the capital projects that were intended. There's been a number of capital projects in the water fund that have been going on over the last couple of years. We've covered these before, the Well 7 to Well 13 interconnect project. Staff's also been working on the water well development project, which is now transitioned into the Well 8 expansion project. Those projects are funded with IEPA loans and will require repayment once those projects are well underway. One related note to that is that we've looked at the annual debt service cost in the water fund, and that's rising from about $1.4 million 2 years ago to about $2.1 million next fiscal year, further demonstrating the need to implement a rate increase in conjunction with the study. Related to that, kind of looking ahead, there are also a number of water-related infrastructure improvements that we need to make. There's a significant amount of water main that needs to be replaced throughout the city. We need to look at replacing our water metering infrastructure, and there's other needs as well that we outlined in the summary. Essentially, the water fund kind of has this two-pronged challenge right now. We need to generate revenues to cover our debt service obligations that we've made a commitment to with some of the capital projects underway, yet we're also trying to build a reserve incrementally in the future so we can cover some of these things on a cash basis without needing to look at additional funding and be able to have the resources in place to replenish that reserve on an annual basis. So we have a couple different challenges with the water fund that we're looking at right now, and that's a summary of the reasons why staff is recommending the 12% rate increase for water. This is consistent with what was done last year. Last year we made up 1.5% of the years where we did 9% and 10.5%, and we're looking at doing the same thing this upcoming year. On the wastewater side for the sewer, There was about $25 million in revenues, $30 million expenditures as budgeted. The two major capital projects that have been going on over the last couple of years are the West Side Sewer Treatment Plant and the Riverside Lift Station project. Those projects combined are roughly $36 million and both IEPA loan funded. Our annual debt service requirements in the wastewater fund are increasing from about $3.6 million to $4.2 million next year. And that really doesn't count the beginning of payment on the Riverside Lift Station project. Once that project is completed, we anticipate an additional increase in our annual debt service obligations in fiscal 24-25. So the two ordinances before you tonight, I did want to mention that we were originally talking about an 8% increase in sewer a couple months ago. We took a look at that and decided we could do 6% given the one-time funds we were able to allocate to some of the sewer projects during this last year. So summary, the two ordinances before you is a 12% increase in water rates, 6% sewer, and no change on the electric side. When you look at our comparisons to other communities, such as Geneva, Batavia, and Naperville, we're about 9%, 11%, a little bit higher than those two communities, a little bit more with Naperville. I do believe there was a chart that was sent out there as well. We are less than ComEd in terms of the electric side, on the electric side. One of the things we wanted to add, too, is that each community does have its own infrastructure and funding operating challenges, so it does make it difficult to compare based on what each community's needs are. One note related to that, Geneva just approved their new rate study with increases of 7.5% for both water and sewer over the next 2 years and 5% for the next 3 years after that. Batavia is doing a 3% increase on the water side and 8% on the sanitary sewer side. So it just kind of shows that every community's got their own challenges dealing with their own specific rate increases. So if there's any questions, be happy to answer them. And Heather, anything else to add? Sorry. So this is sort of the annualized charges, including power cost adjustments as well. Looking at St. Charles, Geneva, Batavia, Naperville, and then ComEd, assuming St. Charles water and wastewater costs were added onto that. Thank you, Heather.
And while everybody's working to formulate their questions, one thing I did just want to add is the water and the utilities are in a unique position. This is not like projects that we can defer. These aren't aesthetic-based projects. If we continue to defer the projects that have already been deferred for a number of years, we are going to get in a situation where we have to repair these. We are going to still have water main breaks. We have some aging infrastructure, and the best way for us to manage this effectively and efficiently within our budgetary resources is to make sure we are planning for these modifications and upgrades to our system throughout, rather than having to necessarily bond out or do emergency repair work. Because if we do not tackle this and do not move forward with this plan, we are still going to encounter these breaks and these crumbling infrastructure issues that we are not going to have an option to fix, but it will be in an emergency situation, which will most likely escalate the cost.
Right.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation, Bill. Appreciate it. So as I stated before, I have concerns with the water rate going up 12%. Last year was 12%. That's 24%. I'm okay with the sewer rate at 6%. I would like to match the rate of inflation. I talk to a lot of constituents that have concerns about the amount of money for the utility bills every month. So what I would like to do is just ask you some questions, see if we can get creative. So first of all, the 12% water rate increase, that's $800,000 a year?
About.
Is that okay? So I'm all for funding what you need, and I'm just thinking if we do 6% on the water rate and take which would be $400,000 roughly, and take $400,000 from a different source of funding, that would accomplish the goal, wouldn't it? To fund it for this year coming up?
The problem with that is that we're not meeting our revenue debt coverage obligations, which are 1.0 net revenues after expenses, to make sure that we can cover the annual debt service costs. So one of the things we talked about, I think, a few months ago was how both water and sewer are below the 1.0 threshold, and they really should be above that. And Another problem with one-time revenue sources is you run into an even greater problem the following year, because now you have to catch up doubly. So it's a difficult problem that really can't be solved with one-time revenue sources. I think a one-time revenue source, for example, the water fund would be extremely useful, and we may come to a point where we need to do that. But like I said before, we have sort of this dual challenge with the water fund in terms of getting the revenues up to where they need to be to meet our obligations, and also eventually trying to build up that reserve so that we can fund some of these improvements on a cash basis with available funds going forward.
So let me ask you. I'm going to digress for a minute. So the McGrath Honda deal, we were going to upfront them $1.2 million roughly. So that money is not going out to them upfront for this year's budget. So that money is I'm assuming available to be used for next year's budget. Is that correct? Because it hasn't been committed by this council for anything?
That money was set aside to make those upfront utility contributions. Since the money isn't going to be necessary, the money simply isn't reserved or set aside anymore, and essentially goes back to the general fund, as the money was initially transferred to the utility funds to upfront those payments.
But it's in the general fund right now.
Right now, it's in utility funds, and since that obligation is not being met with a direct payment anymore, it goes back to the general fund.
Okay, so that money that was not upfronted could be a source of funding for the 6%. Let's say if we did 6% instead of 12%, that is an option.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily specify those specific funds if you want to talk about trying to supplement the fund in some way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not looking to do this long term where we're doing one-time things like this, but it's just I'm hearing a lot of feedback from different residents throughout the 4th Ward. It's just not a couple of residents. And so I just don't think this is sustainable long term. I understand the need to do the infrastructure improvements. I totally support it 100%. I just think we need to get a little creative in the funding source. And if there's an opportunity to provide just a little relief even this year, I would support a 6% increase in the sewer and then a 6% increase in the water rate, which would match the rate of inflation.
And I certainly understand, you know, the last thing we want to do as staff is get up here and recommend a rate increase unless we believe it's absolutely necessary. But trying to relieve some of that burden over the last decade is what got us in this position. I know I am the one that keeps getting up here and saying that, but the problem is we didn't follow our rate study. We have $80 million, $100 million worth of infrastructure improvements to do in the water system. A $1 million or $2 million influx of cash into that system is not going to get us to the place that we need to go. And part of that is because a lot of projects have been deferred to try to relieve some of the burden. We've had COVID, we've had different inflationary issues. So it's been a constant, let's see if we can put this off for a year. We're at the point now where we can't keep putting these off because we are going to get into a situation where we have a ton of work that we need to do and we've got no choice, and we're not going to be able to meet our debt coverage ratios, and we're not going to have the money in the general fund to supplement it absent some large influx of cash from the federal government or the state government to tackle some of these issues. And our priority is to make sure that we have good quality and sustainable water sources for our residents. Certainly understand why utility rates are not something popular with the residents, which is why we try to distill it down to say this should be a self-sustaining fund, and we're looking at an average of $12. And we did look at those numbers to see if we could reduce those water rates anywhere. We did come down 2% on the sewer side to say that we could supplement that a little bit and alleviate some of that burden. But because the water has not been met for so many years, and then every time we don't do that percentage, we are losing the cash that can then be dedicated to
because I'm looking at the utility rate, the recommended rate increase from the study and then the actual recommendation. So last year it was the study recommended 10.5 and we were at 12. And then this year it's recommending 10.5 and we're going to be at 12. So we're exceeding the recommendation. And
the prior 2 years that was not followed, we did 9 rather than 10.5 and 9 rather than 10.5. So we were already underneath our rate study, which is why we had the benefit catch up last year, and we're recommending 12%.
But if the funding is there, so let's say you get $800,000 on 12% increase, and the funding is there if you do 6% and it's $400,000, and we give you the $400,000, you have what you need for the upcoming budget year to cover those expenses, do you not?
For a single project, but now you're using the compounding interest
So that's the key word, is you want it to compound, is what you're looking to do. Okay.
It would make, whatever future, increase might be necessary the following year that much bigger because we're playing catch-up again. So one of the things we're trying to do is to avoid those large
So that, right, I understand. So that's what brings me back to the McGrath Honda thing. So if you do the calculations, if there's 1.2 million from McGrath that was not used up front, and you do the math on that, would that cover the 6% with,
It would cover a project. It wouldn't cover the inflation that would result in the years going down the path.
Okay. Well, where it stands at 12%, I can't support the water rate increase. That's I can do the sewer, but not the water rate increase.
Yes, Ryan.
If 12% were to pass, what does next year's recommendation look like?
Obviously, we're not sure yet. I know Public Works is working on a water utility master plan, and as part of that, we're looking at trying to update what those projected rate increases might look like. So that's a process we're working on right now. We actually met recently to talk about capital budgeting for next year because we really want to get ahead of it and, be in a position to make some solid recommendations.
Is it fair to assume that it's unlikely that it'll go down?
Correct.
Okay. So I would agree with Brian. $12 a month may not seem like a big deal for one user, but when we start adding this up and we keep going down, I think there's a larger challenge here of, at some point, bigger conversations about budget are going to be having to be made, and trying to say, well, if we don't do it now, it's only going to get harder down the line. We say that every single time, and we keep coming back to this body saying, well, that's why we got to increase this. And there was a person up here who was hesitant about the sales tax increase because he wanted to use potentially some of those funds to tackle some of these types of projects so that we don't have to go back to the water well, and have to go back and say, we have to increase this. And I think we get up here what we're trying to accomplish. We wait longer, the problem will, get harder and worse. But the flip side is, it feels like every time we come back here, well, if we don't do it now, if we don't raise it now, then we just, something has to give. There has to be another door potentially that we can look at.
And a lot of this is compounded by some of the projects that we're obligated to take on. We've got things like contaminants in water that we always have to monitor for, and PFAS is one of the things that's coming up, and they're starting to test for that, and that's going to be a mandate if our wells ever pop for that we have to figure out the money for. Lead service lines are another one, and that's a reason why that fund should be looked at on its own, because it's an operational fund. It's no different than a NICOR or a Comcast. You're paying for the service, and that service should be self-sustaining. To try to continue to supplement from our general fund and keep diverting revenue from that fund to try to supplement some of these things, it just doesn't make sense. It's a user-based cost, and that's where we need to make sure that it's sustained. And certainly if council does not feel comfortable on that 12%, the staff will probably be back at some point saying we've got a major water main repair that we've got to figure out how to fund.
And it's difficult to see that this recommendation has been made 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and for the four of us that are having this little side conversation, none of us were here. So, and there's nothing you can do about going back and changing some of that. You have to look at it. At the same time, feeling like we have exhausted every single option, that we don't have to always go and turn the dial a little bit more, because we'll be back next year turning the dial a little bit more, and feeling like getting creative and looking at some of these things to offset those costs would be appreciated.
And I think, that's something we can take a look at next year in terms of, is there, some extra money that we can allocate to help, supplement the water fund in some way. But like I was saying before, we have this sort of dual challenge with maintaining an adequate reserve and trying to build that reserve and maintaining our adequate debt service coverage so that we can, stay above the threshold that we committed to. And a lot of these projects were set in motion along with the rate increase several years ago. So this is stuff that's already happening. And then I know we're also talking about looking at the future, and those are a separate set of challenges that we have to meet as well.
And one of the other points I want to make is that, as you're talking about these strategic visioning for how we keep it so that we're coming back for these rate increases every year, I think this is what Bill and I have been trying to do, is lay that groundwork for saying we've got to rip the Band-Aid right now to start to alleviate some of that burden in the future, and it's going to take years to get there. It's going to take years of continuing to lower our debt burden so that we have more cash on hand to be able to pay these things as the projects come along. But unfortunately, that's not a 1 or 2 year fix. But it's uncomfortable now, so we can get to the point that we don't have to do these large rate increases year after year, and we have these reserves built up and these cash on hand, so we can create more of a revolving operational program to get there. But it is going to take some time, and that's the work that we're trying to lay the groundwork for now, which is why we're coming to you with all of these difficult discussions and decisions, because we want to be as conservative fiscally as we can and make sure we're set up the best for the future to maintain our infrastructure and our budget.
Rita.
I've been through a lot of Band-Aids. We've done it often. So to my colleagues who haven't yet done it, it's been done. Using Brian's example of, speaking of, let's, for now, I'm saying, how about not for now? How about looking at something long-term? Like perhaps, we have other sources of income that go into the general fund. Is it possible that the residents can see some of the benefit of our increase in sales taxes and our booming entertainment district and all the money that brings in? Can we somehow turn that around instead of nickel-diming them to death every month, that they can have an advantage of maybe getting our larger projects, our major infrastructure projects funded through the general fund, and the maintenance or the operational costs, like you said, keep that with the enterprise accounts. But it's 12%. Oh my, it's so high. And as it is right now, our sewer bill is higher than our water bill. And to explain that, and I remember when that flip happened, and that was a nightmare. But I think we need to just maybe for this year, Brian's suggestion, but moving forward, we need to rethink this. We can't just keep, nickel-diming, $12 a month, $12 a month forever and ever. Maybe we need a new way of funding these kind of projects.
Yes, Ed.
I guess I just want to add that, as it's stated in the packet today, there's no increase in the electric monthly rates, and going back, I want to say almost 10 or 12 years, we went through the same process with
That's the Band-Aid I was talking about, yeah.
So over the last 2 years, obviously, we're seeing, I wouldn't say a reward, but we're seeing a pause, at least in having to go back to the electric customer and get them, with an additional fee. But at this point, I believe we should follow that same path with the water fund and the sewer fund until we get those self-sustaining. As, like I said, we did this with the electric fund over a period of like 7-8 years.
And I think just to reiterate that point too, I think when we at the staff level are looking at this, we're looking at that comprehensively as that total bill, which is why I think I just want to reemphasize that the overall bill is a 4.7% increase with that 0% on water, 6% on sewer, and then 12%. 0% on electric, 6% on sewer, and that 12% on water. So we are trying to look at that and balance that so that it's not a huge increase all at once. I mean, we're in line with our other communities, Batavia, Geneva, the 3s, the 4s, the 7s of what they're doing. Like I said, I certainly understand this isn't an easy discussion to have, but just trying to make sure that council really understands what we need to continue funding that infrastructure and make sure that these projects are being maintained in the most responsible way.
So you said that took about 7 years of doing that to get there?
Maybe staff could jump in on it, but yeah, it was a number of years where we had increases that got in the vicinity of 3-4%, and it was because that's where I actually learned the process of that part of it, because the utility fund for electric was not self-sustaining, so we weren't charging enough is basically what it came down to.
Yeah.
So I would say my hesitation is not at all on why we need to do this or the risk if we don't. My concern is the open-endedness of, 7-8 years of, 12%. We have to keep raising this, and we're trying to say, but this is zero, don't worry, but this is going to keep rising until, if we can get more of a projection of forecast of when that point could potentially be. Because again, when you go back to, residents and business owners and saying, let me walk you through the why, and they don't just see 12%, 12%, 12%, when people are people. And not gonna hold you to a crystal ball and be like, well, you were wrong, you told me 3 years ago, like,
And that's part of what we're trying to
Yeah.
do this year, is accomplish some of that and really get a more comprehensive view of all of the projects that need to be done within that system, so we have a better idea of how can we spread this? How can we make this work with our existing debt load, and how can we minimize the rate increase that we have to do that by?
Yeah, the example that Ed was referring to with our electric, that's not replacing, 100-plus year infrastructure. I mean, that was just getting our operational costs. This is beyond that. We have a whole different, ball of wax that we're dealing with our water. That's why I think it's a little different. That, and sheesh, let's get our crystal balls out and see how long it's going to take us to replace all our, it's just not going to happen. Right, so I think that's why we need to think of a different funding source for the infrastructure. Sure. Yep, they do, right, and that's
We're
like.
fighting over the same infrastructure money that everybody else is.
Right, that I understand, but I'm thinking just in-house, that maybe there's another way to fund major infrastructure projects.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah, just a comment. I mean, I'm echoing what my colleagues are saying who have hesitation regarding the water increases, and I 100% get it. I used to work for a utility company. But to Rita's point, I'm hearing what she's saying, and yeah, for sure. I mean, I would, dare I say, expectation would be that we develop some sort of policy. Who knows? I'm just talking out loud. Maybe a certain percent of any surplus that we receive because we had a surplus this year. We had a surplus the year before. Some sort of mechanism, to Rita's point, where, hey, we have a surplus, 10% is always going to capital or something instead of just going into the general fund or taking up a certain percentage of the general fund. I agree with that. I mean, we need a net, some sort of sustainable, because coming to the well, yeah, it's not gonna work.
And that's something with, as we look forward to next year's budget process, especially with some of the changes that we've been able to enact over the last several months, we could potentially look at some of these really significant water capital infrastructure challenges and say, okay, a slice of this or a piece of this or all of this is something we're going to try and find some alternate revenue sources so we can, try and keep that rate increase to a manageable level, an acceptable level. I think with some of the steps that we've been putting in place over the last 3 months, we'll be able to better position to do that this upcoming year.
I would also, if I just throwing it out there as well, has the city ever thought about implementing some sort of initiative where we encourage residents to save water, I guess, or the public utilities do it, NICOR, ComEd, with low flow shower heads, things like that. I don't know.
Certainly something we can look into.
Okay. Just thinking out loud.
Yes.
I'm gonna just say one more thing, and I just think we still need to get creative with our funding source for this, and I think we can start tonight with it, and just I'm in at 6% for the water fund, and then look for those additional revenue sources from different channels, but that's where I'm at with that. So.
Steve.
Thank you, Ron. Question: with this percentage of an increase, obviously we have business consumers in our city. Have we reached out to any of the large water users in St. Charles? Have they? Not specifically. Do any of those large water users, do they get any kind of discounted rates from the city? Or they all pay the same price? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Scott.
So, and this is sort of in line with do we ever, if you're doing a projection, whether it's 12% or 6% or whatever, do you really get there? I mean, are we trying to climb a hill that you can't climb with this revenue stream, is the question. Because, I mean, you look at it now and you've got a revenue stream on the water, and we're a few $100s under Geneva, we're, a few $100s under Naperville, so, there's a little bit of room there maybe. But, I mean, with the dollars that you're talking about and the projects that you're identifying in your memo and other places, do you ever get there? Can you ever revenue your way out of this problem? And if you can't, then no matter whether you agree with the 12% or 6%, you gotta get creative, because you're not gonna get there.
To your point, it's a good point. I think it's a challenge, and I think, to some of the comments that have been made here tonight about trying to find a way to supplement, some of the funding that we need for some of these projects, but because it's a lot. We have lead service lines, we have significant water main replacement that needs to be done, throughout the community. So to answer your question, I mean, sure, with any modeling, you could get there, but, what's the impact,
And
to the resident, to the customer.
Residents.
Right. So we're sensitive to that. All the more reason we tried to make the adjustments on the electric and sewer side, to make this total increase less than 5%. I know it's not perfect, but we're trying to balance everything as best we can in terms of where the real needs are, especially with water being the highest priority.
And I think that's some of the reason that Bill and I have been talking about funding sources, revenue sources, trying to diversify those revenue sources. So as we start to tackle and get a hold of some of these projects that we've said we needed to tackle, that frees up some of that lump sum money that we can then divert to other projects as well. So as we start to get that better financial long-term management strategy in place, then we have those funds available to start saying, okay, this year we've got a major project we need to tackle. Here's where we're diverting those funds this year.
What other things are we trying? So with budgets, I mean, so we've had the sales tax increase, right? And we're talking about, looking and trying. What other things are we trying and looking at?
So we've looked at a number of other, you're talking about increased revenue sources?
Well, I mean, Todd's point's excellent. I mean, sure, raise it 12%. We'll be back here next year looking at 12, and then you're at another 12, right? And you're passing that on to water's water. They have to use water, right? And it's going to keep going up, but we're trying to close this gap. And if we're saying, we're looking at everything, what are we looking at? Like the list, if you're going to sit down with somebody and say, walk me through all the way so that you don't have to look at, 30% increase over the next 3 years, what types of things are we looking at to try and tackle this?
Yeah, and I think we've looked at all of the major revenue sources that we have. Obviously, we're limited as a city in terms of what revenue sources we can generate, sales tax being one of the big dollar ones. It's a discussion that we had just a few months ago here. There are some smaller revenue opportunities for us, grant funding, things like that, but looking at the high dollar amount of the project, certainly if we, implement some, and I don't even want to throw a name out there to get anybody riled up, but if we were to implement something that was going to generate, say, $200,000 a year, that's not going to make the significant impact that we need. We need larger grant-type funds or the actual source of the projects to be sustainable on their own. And that's
I'm not sure that we should be so comfortable passing that on to, Mr. and Mrs. Smith who live in St. Charles because we have to close the gap. I'd rather find a revenue source on somebody else similar to, our sales tax increase because 50-60% of people were coming from out of town.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the things that we can do, since, the city has taken steps to address its general capital infrastructure needs, there's probably going to be some opportunities we can look at. If we do have surplus funding from the general fund, we can look at trying to bring that in to fund some of these other things as well and try and offset that. So based on where we're at with the cycle, we just approved the budget process, obviously, earlier this month. That's something we can start taking a look at as the year goes on. And as we get some of the other studies in place, so we can kind of see what we can do and kind of pivot and shift based on some of the changes the city's made.
And it's not to say that we can't put a hold on some of these projects, but this rate structure with the recommendations for the rate structure was put in place based on projects that were sort of gone over of the top projects that need to be done and not approved by city council, but sort of, essentially given the green light on, okay, here's what we need to do to get these projects done. So that's why this rate structure is what it is and is being recommended. It was based on that set of projects that needed to be accomplished. So it wasn't just pulled out of thin air that we want this 12%, with 9.5% and 10.5%.
Yes, Steve.
And what happens when water usage goes down? So people get more efficient equipment, the bill's going up to use less water. That makes our gap even bigger, doesn't it?
More efficient fixtures has been, something obviously that people are using more and more to try and limit their usage. So it does become a challenge.
It still works. It helps. I mean, these public utilities do it, and it actually increases usage. Actually, natural gas is used more when they. Anyway, that's what we found in the public utilities. But anyway, I have a question. I'm hearing what everyone's saying. Yeah, can I just make a motion? I'll approve it if we, I'll make a motion to approve at 6%.
Second.
Motion by Dave, second by Ryan.
I didn't hear the motion, I'm sorry.
A motion
So I'm
to
sorry,
approve.
I just want to clarify, you're making
Just
in reference to
amending
the
it.
water only.
The water,
two
yes.
different ordinances.
Yeah, just the water, yeah.
Okay, so motion is made by Dave, second by Brian. Any other questions or comments anywhere? Okay, let's do the roll call.
Bancroft?
Yes.
Petrola?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Besser?
Yes.
Weber?
No.
Calamaris?
Yes.
Payleitner?
No.
Bonnegaard?
Yes.
Okay, so that motion does pass. And here's the next question, what do we do with that 6% difference that we have budgeted for? How can we, I presume you can come up with something, some proposal to make up that gap.
I don't think there's a simple fix to making up that gap. We'll go back and look. We'll probably have to defer some projects ultimately and re-strategize about the long-term plan for the water system. And that's essentially what's been done for the last several years is we don't have the money to do this project, so it needs to get pushed down the road. So that's what likely will happen just because of the amount of the dollars associated with some of these projects. It's not that simple to come up with $5, $6, $7 million for some of these projects all at once.
But that's okay, right? I mean, we can't pay for everything every day.
No.
We can't.
Well,
I mean, we have
it's-
to prioritize what we can afford to pay and what we can tackle and what's most pressing.
Yeah, I'd sort of compare it more to a bottleneck. At some point, the projects are going to start to overtake the amount of the things that need to be done. So we're going to get to a point where we've got more projects that are immediate and pressing of a need to do, which is likely going to put us in a situation that we have to bond out or do some sort of debt issuance for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Rita.
Yep. Did I miss something? This increase was going to bring us 800,000 more.
That was the 12%, not
Right.
the 6%.
So we're not talking millions. All we need to make up for is like 400, right?
For the single year,
Yes,
and then
right.
compounded, because it would be.
Right. No, I'm talking about this year because I'm hoping to get a whole new plan in place to fix the infrastructure payment process. Oh, sorry.
And that was my question, is the 400,000 then, can that get prioritized against whatever projects you have that are taking precedent right now? It isn't just that it would go wasted, right? I mean, you still
So
use.
this is a comprehensive, we'll just have to take a look at the budget and come back with what we think some of the estimated adjustments we're going to have to make, and let you know what those are. Because some of this, like I said, some of the rate increase is based on projects that are already happening, and, we're beginning to have to repay the loans and bond and debt on that.
And what I did was when our debt service payments are going up this year, correct?
Yes.
From 1.4 to 2.1, is that correct?
Yeah, it was one of those, yeah.
So $700,000 of that is debt service from our projects that are already finished. So we lost $400,000 of an already increase for our debt service.
The reserves, what is our balance in the reserves right now? Is it 25 million?
If you're talking about general fund,
Yeah.
I'd have to double check and see.
Okay. Is there any reason why we can't take $400,000 out of there to plug the gap for this year's upcoming project?
Yeah,
I would totally support that. I want you to accomplish your goal. My objective is not to give sticker shock to residents that are already really just concerned about their utility rates. So I'm willing to support using some of the general fund reserves for the $400,000. I don't.
And that's something let's take a look at over the next couple of weeks to see if that, is a stopgap option and kind of what we're looking at going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no other comments on this issue? So now we're going to go with 7D, recommendation to approve an ordinance amending Title 13 Public Utilities, Chapter 1312 Sewer of the St. Charles Municipal Code to allow for changes in the rate structure for the sewer utility. I think that was pretty much discussed in the previous.
The 6% was the recommendation, down from 8% in the last discussion.
Move for approval.
Moved by Brian, second by Dave. Roll call, please.
Bancroft?
Yes.
Petrola?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Besser?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Calamaris?
Yes.
Payleitner?
Yes.
Bonnegaard?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. Thank you. Item 8A, City Administration, recommendation to approve a resolution in support of tax increment financing.
Thank you. This is a resolution before you to support keeping the TIF statute as is. There is an executive summary put together with some of the bullets. Over the last several years, there has been many attempts by different legislators to actually amend the TIF statutes to reduce the ability of the city to have that increment generated and use that as an economic development tool. So as everybody is probably aware, TIF is a very powerful economic development tool for us. It's one of the few things we have to incentivize developments. And as you can see in the executive summary, there are 4 bullets, a couple of which I'll go over briefly. One is to reduce the number of years for the TIF district from 23 to 20. It provides that municipalities cannot approve TIF districts that overlap with an existing redevelopment area. And a couple of the big important points that have come out of some of the recent legislation that is now on pause is that 10% of the money generated from a TIF district would be deposited essentially into a chamber of commerce that they would be able to use at their discretion. And then the final bullet is that if a school district, which I'm sure everybody is aware is one of our biggest opponents of TIF districts, decides they do not want to participate in the TIF district, they would be removed from it and they would still generate any increased revenue that is generated from the creation and the city's efforts on that TIF district. So it's very detrimental to the city to amend that legislation, but it is something that is tackled regularly. We've been working with Metro West, our local council of government, to continue to oppose these along with the Illinois Municipal League, but this resolution would just allow us to take a formal stance on wanting to keep the TIF statutes as they are today.
Thank you. Yes.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
What percentage of TIFs would you deem, not you personally, but successful? What's the rate when a city passes a TIF, says, yes, we're going to go and do this, the likelihood that you could stamp a success, half the time, 70%.
Can you define success for me?
Paid off, I guess?
Paid off would be,
So generating a positive revenue line?
Let's say a positive outcome financially, buildings get built, parties walk away going.
I would say most. Nick, you got an opinion on that?
Yeah, I probably do. I think, boy, that's a tough one. I've been involved in 100 TIFs. Vast majority are successful.
Yeah.
So 80%.
Yeah. I mean, maybe even higher.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's a qualification of not only just paying for itself, but are you getting the benefit of jump starting what you want to what you want to jump start? So there's a little gray area about what that means. But if your metric is only did it pay for itself, usually vast majority.
And I would say even those ones that don't necessarily pay for themselves, there is some positive outcome that results from them, even if it's not necessarily financial.
Does this, I know we recently passed a TIF policy here in the city. Does this impact the pay-as-you-go TIF at all?
This does not. So this has nothing to do with our policy. It's really just allowing the state statute to stay as is and allow the timing in the city to essentially exclusively use the revenue generated from it.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Motion in a second, please. Moved by Todd, seconded by Ryan. Roll call, please.
Bancroft?
Yes.
Petrola?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Besser?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Calamaris?
Yes.
Payleitner?
Yes.
Bongard?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes. 8B, recommendation to approve an ordinance amending ordinance number 2022-M-17 with regard to the deferred imposition of municipal push tax on plays of video gaming terminals.
Thank you. This is a further extension of the ordinance that was passed by City Council in October of 2021, given that case is still pending before the appellate court, or 2 cases before the appellate court. We are still waiting for that to resolve itself, so we are asking to delay and defer the implementation of this ordinance. We are actually going to extend it until December 31st, 2023, give us a little bit more time and keep it on a biannual cycle if we need to.
Thank you.
Move for approval? Oh, sorry.
Moved by Rita.
Second.
Second by Todd. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
That's all. Thank you.
Any public comments on that? Additional items from the mayor's council or staff tonight?
That's me.
Yes, Rita.
Recently, I had mentioned this to the chief and he agreed, that D303 School Board narrowly approved a memorandum of understanding with the St. Charles Police Department called Handle with Care. And in light of some negative chatter, I thought informing the council was in order, and the chief has graciously offered to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Sokaitis and Alderman Paylighter. So this passed with a 4-3 recommendation at last week's school board meeting. Handle with Care is really, it just complements the procedure already in place. So we have reciprocal reporting agreements within the district. So should a child or a student be affected outside of the classroom with a police matter, we have that notification already in place to the district and vice versa. The goal of this project is to protect, heal, and make sure kids thrive. Our policy states that should we deal with the student outside of the school building and there's a concern reference their emotional or physical well-being, we will notify District 303 via email, and that email will solely state, handle that student with care. There'll be no other confidentiality matters that will be compromised. Should we be able to notify the parents, we will, but for whatever reason, there was some ambivalence as far as the passage of this. This program's already in place throughout the county. It's endorsed by the state of Illinois. Their program's called Safe to Help. And like I said, we do this already through reciprocal reporting. This just puts a moniker on it, if you will, and that is just Handle with Care.
Good, thank you. So you addressed one of the concerns that I've heard, you know, in the background noise is that they're eliminating parental notification, and that's not the case.
Not at all. If we can notify the parent of our desire to notify the district, we will. Not each and every occurrence that's practical. And then if the school wants to partake in any conversations beyond just our Handle with Care notification, they would then reach out for the parent or guardian and seek permission. Okay. But it's really just to make sure there's a traumatic experience outside in the community. When that child returns to the classroom, we want to make sure that the district knows that there might be some underlying issues there.
Great. And one more quick question, Chief. D303 is serviced by other PDs. Do they also have this in place? West Chicago, South Elgin?
It's in place outside of Greater Kane County, not quite. I think we're the first municipality between West Chicago, Campton Hills, South Elgin, and so forth, where I think we were the first to take it forward and sign the MOU. It didn't require council action. I signed it on behalf of the city and the police department, but I believe they're going to follow suit.
They're going to follow with the rest. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? And can I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second. Moved by Brian, second by Dave. Roll call, please.
Bancroft?
Yes.
Petrola?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Bassner?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Calamaris?
Yes.
Payleitner?
Yes.
Bonnegar?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes. We are adjourned.
The, fourth year. Right.
So you're telling me a kid's got a traumatic experience?
No, because of
enforcement outside, and you don't think that's...
Go where the people are.
I agree.